Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's topic, hip-hop. For our discussion of hip-hop, we're going to be focusing on the artists Jay-Z and Nas. Starting out with Jay-Z, I want to consider hip-hop and the good life, authenticity, masculinity, and the accumulation of wealth. In our reading, My Passport Says Shawn and Looking For Leroy, Illegible Black Masculinities, published in 2013 by Mark Anthony Neal, there are a series of arguments about what Jay-Z and other hip-hop artists express and embody. Neal argues that these artists, especially Jay-Z, can express a hip-hop cosmopolitanism that challenges conventional ideas of masculinity through the creation of hip-hop music and culture. Typically, the word cosmopolitan is an adjective used to describe a worldly person, a person with different qualities or attributes from all over the world. Therefore, cosmopolitanism is often associated with cities. But hip-hop, the culture that emerged with rap as a music genre in the 1970s among African American and Latino communities in urban settings, seems distant from the idea of being worldly. So we have to ask, how can a hip-hop artist be cosmopolitan? Neal argues that using an idea of diaspora connected to cultural heritage, as opposed to nationality or the country you're from, or even racial heritage, diaspora as a cultural heritage can be carried, embodied. That means the different tropes and themes expressed or personas adopted can be part of a diaspora, can travel, and therefore incorporate different places and different ideas from around the world. And that's how he ends up thinking about Jay-Z as a cosmopolitan hip-hop artist. Hip-hop cosmopolitanism for Neal then can create an alternate culture, diaspora, an expression of masculinity. Neal focuses on Jay-Z's embodiment and performance of hip-hop cosmopolitanism by reading or analyzing the details of his music videos and contexts. Going through the layers of meaning expressed through references in lyrics and images and movements and scenes in music videos, Neal is able to advance this idea of cosmopolitan hip-hop. He uses queer theory, feminist theory, and economic and socio-political analysis to draw out his ideas and interpretations of cosmopolitanism and hip-hop. Given this overview of Neal's argument, we want to keep in mind that Neal is challenging conventions or ideas, conventional ideas or narratives that exist in hip-hop. He also departs from a lot of different expectations about what hip-hop culture means and what it signifies. In addition to my commentary on Neal's work, I will continue to talk about Nas's Illmatic album based on the documentary I asked you to watch, Time is Illmatic, and then there'll be a blog prompt at the end of this video for you to design or build your own blog prompts and responses to the material that we have here. So a major idea that Neal advances about hip-hop in general, hip-hop is all about authenticity, especially the struggle and ingenuity that's required to start from the bottom and rise to the top. Whether this is associated with illicit or illegal activity, ultimately hip-hop is about striving, struggling, and creative ingenuity in order to both survive, gain economic success, and of course create rap music. So for example, Jay-Z often talks about the profits he got from selling crack cocaine to start his entertainment and clothing line, Rockefeller. Jay-Z, Neal argues, is expected to keep it real, but with his financial and entrepreneurial success, he also shows us what it looks like to gain access to the good life. The good life then, according to Neal, is not about sheer consumerism or commercialism. It's about getting the cars, the money, the women, the leisure, the pleasure, the joy that is often denied or not accessible when starting at the bottom or in a condition of struggling, as was the experience for Jay-Z and many Black people in urban areas. The good life also involves achieving through hustle and artistic skill. So it's not just about getting the cars, money, and women as objectified objects, but rather about showing the results of hustle and artistic skill, according to Neal. Consumption and desire for material goods, brands, clothes, material items attributed to the wealthy and often white members of society, these are all part of the good life. Jay-Z presents them and shares the desire, but he also performs the success, which brings up the question, does this make him a sellout? According to Mark Anthony Neal, not so. This is what makes him cosmopolitan, entrepreneurial, and a successful artist. But for others, there's a different interpretation or argument, and I welcome you to push back against Neal's perspective as you're thinking about his work and his overview of who Jay-Z is and what's desirable and pursued within hip-hop culture. Probably one of the biggest challenges within hip-hop culture is the extent to which women are treated as commodities. So this brings up the question, are they commodities or fellow artists, especially when it comes to the music videos? In the case of Girls, 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 according to Neal, the lyrics suggest that Jay-Z has every type of woman. Yet, at the end of his music video for Girls, 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 we see him walk off the set. We see backstage, and we see that Jay-Z is a persona that is distinct from Shawn. The major takeaway here is that Jay-Z isn't a feminist, but he does understand that men and women are a part of a commercial subculture where hip-hop artists can create who they are with flow, that is, lyrical, rhetorical, skill, and the music video visuals. Next, we have the music video, Bonnie and Clyde. Neal suggests that instead of just being another music video, it's actually creating a space for romance, particularly through the gender ambiguous or gender crossover with the vocals. For example, Beyonce sings her part, If I Was Your Girlfriend, which was originally sung by Prince. Prince's vocals were sped up in the original so that it was hard to tell if they were being sung by a man or a woman, effectively queering his voice so that it is cross-gender. With gender being shaken up or being sort of revised, Neal suggests this creates an opportunity for Jay-Z to express an aspect of romance that conventionally wouldn't be available within hip-hop culture. Then there's the song, Excuse Me Miss, which takes place in a video. Is this video all about bling and a beautiful woman? On one hand, yes. But on the other hand, Neal suggests that in the elevator, we get a different, more intimate look at Shawn, Jay-Z's persona as a worldly man, a man with style, checking out his suit here, but also one who's willing to give up everything for his ideal woman. So this brings up the question, is this a moment of the heterosexual gaze objectifying a beautiful woman, or is Jay-Z turned Shawn having a romantic fantasy? So is Jay-Z about romance in this scene, or is it a moment of objectifying a woman? That's up for debate, and we can continue the discussion in class or across our blog posts and comments. But Neal nevertheless provides us with a useful way of thinking about identity, sexuality, and hip-hop. Because identity and sexuality are always up for negotiation, and the ongoing conflation of hip-hop and hypersexuality, we often presume that the men who have become the public face of hip-hop would have to be straight. This line of thinking is typically buttressed or supported by the rarely disputed assumption that the foundational generation of hip-hoppers would be responsible for the most authentic, purest form of hip-hop. In other words, the purest form of hip-hop often is presumed to align with the foundational, and I should put that in air quotes, idea of being straight as the ultimate or the ideal form of masculinity. But again, as Neal suggests, these assumptions can and always are up for negotiation, but are difficult to push back against. Consequently, homophobia and misogyny are reproduced because of the hypermasculinity that is assumed to be the authenticity of hip-hop. But in more recent years, that might be changing. Take, for example, the hip-hop artist Lil Nas X, who does choose his name, Nas, as homage to his favorite rapper, Nas X, as we'll talk about further. Excuse me, just Nas. It's not Nas X. Sorry about that typo. And we also want to note that Neal wrote this book a solid 10 years ago. So ideas about homophobia and misogyny, while they're part of hip-hop culture, it is evolving. As we transition to talking about Nas and Jay-Z, I want to highlight that they did have an intense rivalry at one point. So according to some scholars and cultural critics of hip-hop, between 1994 and 1996, Jay-Z was recording his debut studio album, Reasonable Doubt, and he had asked Nas to feature on the album, but Nas didn't show up. With Nas's absence, Jay-Z ultimately ended up sampling his voice and including it on his song. From that point on, they started having jabs at one another between 1996 and 2001. This kicked into high gear in 2001 with Jay-Z's song, Takeover. With Takeover, Jay-Z jabs at Nas, saying, "Oh yeah, I sampled your voice, you was using it wrong, you made it a hotline, and I made it a song." He also questions how long it took Nas to come out with Illmatic. And so for the second part of this lecture series, focusing on hip-hop, I'm now going to turn to talking about Illmatic in the next video.